There is a number that appeared on a South Korean music chart on the morning of February 28, 2026, that stopped the global music industry in its tracks. Not because it was unexpected, not because people hadn't been watching, waiting, predicting, but because when that number finally landed, when the 24-hour window closed and the data was confirmed, even the people who believed most deeply in what BLACKPINK was capable of had to take a breath. 1,461,785. That was how many physical copies of BLACKPINK's third EP, Deadline, sold on a single day. Day 1. In 24 hours. Not streams. Not digital downloads. Physical copies, shipped, tracked, and counted across South Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, North America, and Europe simultaneously. And that was just the beginning. Because by the time the first week closed out, that number had climbed even higher, to 1,774,000 copies. A new all-time record for any K-pop girl group in the history of the chart that tracks them. The question this video is going to answer is not simply what that number means. It's how BLACKPINK, nearly a decade into their career, got there. And what it says about the direction that global music is heading when a girl group from Seoul can put up numbers that no female act in the modern era of the music industry has touched. Stay with this, because the answer is more layered and more fascinating than the headline suggests. 1. Background and context, the weight of a sales record. Before we talk about the record that fell, we need to understand what a K-pop album sales record actually represents, because it is not the same thing as a record in the Western music industry. When a Western artist releases an album and charts on the Billboard 200, that chart reflects a combined total of physical purchases, digital downloads, track equivalent albums from individual song sales, and streaming equivalent albums from audio plays. The methodology blends everything together. In that world, a chart position can be achieved through Spotify playlist placement, radio airplay, and a casual stream from someone who had a song recommended to them. K-pop's physical sales charts, specifically Hanteo Chart, South Korea's primary real-time sales tracker, measure something different. They count physical copies sold. Every unit, every version, every photocard set. And behind every one of those copies is a human being, often a fan, who made a deliberate decision to purchase. This is the context the industry often misses. Physical album buying in K-pop is not a passive behavior. Albums come in multiple versions, sometimes 4, 6, or 8 different editions of the same release, each with different cover art, different photocards featuring different members, different bonus content. Fans buy multiple versions not out of confusion, but out of choice. They buy to collect. They buy to support their act on the charts. They buy to enter fan sign event lotteries, where additional purchases increase odds of winning access. They buy because the album is, as much as a musical artifact, a cultural object that carries meaning within the fandom community. What this means is that a first day or first week sales figure on Hanteo Chart is a snapshot of how deep a fandom runs, how global it is, and how organized it is willing to be. It is a number that reflects not just love for music, but coordinated, mobilized community action on a global scale. For years, that ceiling kept getting pushed higher. In the early 2010s, first-generation acts set the benchmarks. Second-generation groups eclipsed them. By the third and fourth generation, acts like Twice, Mamamoo, aespa, New Jeans, and Le Sserafim, the numbers began to climb into territory that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. By 2023, the undisputed holder of the first-day sales record for a K-pop girl group was aespa. Their May 2023 mini-album, My World, moved 1,372,929 copies on its first day, a number so large that most observers considered it a benchmark that would stand for years. The first week record, meanwhile, belonged to BLACKPINK themselves from their 2022 release Born Pink, which had posted approximately 1.54 million copies in its opening week. These were numbers that felt stable, settled. They didn't look breakable, at least not anytime soon. Then came February 2026, and BLACKPINK reminded the world that they were still writing the record books. 2. BLACKPINK's journey to this moment. BLACKPINK's commercial story is one of the most studied trajectories in modern pop music. But to understand what happened with Deadline, you need to follow a specific thread. The momentum that was building, quietly and powerfully, across a decade of releases, tours, and cultural milestones, toward exactly this kind of eruption. They debuted under YG Entertainment in August 2016 with a double single, Boom Baya, and Whistle. Both tracks charted internationally within weeks, an unusual achievement for any debuting act. let alone a K-pop girl group in 2016, when the genre's Western footprint was still modest. What followed was a career built on deliberate spacing. YG Entertainment released music less frequently than most of their peers, and the fan community, the Blinks, frequently voiced frustration at the gaps between releases. But with hindsight, that spacing created something valuable, demand that compounded with every passing month. Their 2018 and 2019 releases built international credibility. The 2020 full-length debut, the album, was a commercial milestone, moving nearly 800,000 physical copies in its first week and debuting on the Billboard 200. For the era, those numbers were extraordinary for a K-pop girl group. According to reporting from South Korean entertainment media at the time, the scale of international pre-orders had surprised even the industry analysts who tracked global K-pop sales data. Then came BLACKPINK in September 2022. Their second studio album crossed 1 million copies on its first day alone, making BLACKPINK the first K-pop girl group in history to break the million-unit barrier in a single 24-hour window. The first week closed at approximately 1.54 million copies. The album debuted on the Billboard 200 at number 1, another historic first for a K-pop girl group on America's flagship album chart. The Born Pink World Tour, which ran from October 2022 through September 2023, cemented BLACKPINK's position as the most commercially powerful touring act in K-pop history. 66 shows across 22 countries. Attendance of approximately 1.8 million people. A worldwide gross of $330 million according to touring data, breaking the record for the highest-grossing concert tour ever by a female group and an Asian act at the time of its conclusion. That number was not a K-pop milestone. It was a global touring milestone. Full stop. And then, the group went quiet as a unit. Through 2023 and into 2024, each member pursued solo careers with notable independence. Rose released music that achieved significant global chart success. Lisa pursued international collaborations. Jennie expanded her creative and brand identity. Jisoo balanced acting with music. The Blinks maintained their fandom infrastructure, streaming campaigns, social media coordination, chart monitoring, through the entire period of silence, waiting for the signal that the group was coming back together. That signal came in December 2023. YG Entertainment announced that all 4 members had renewed their contracts for group activities, and that a new album and world tour were in development. The reaction from the Blink community was immediate and global. Fan forums, Discord servers, and social media accounts across every major platform shifted into campaign mode almost overnight. What would eventually become the Deadline album campaign had begun. The Deadline World Tour launched on July 5, 2025 at Goyang Stadium in South Korea. Marketed as the group's first all-stadium tour, it ran 33 shows across Asia, North America, and Europe, concluding on January 26, 2026 at Kai Tak Stadium in Hong Kong. Every single one of those 33 shows sold out. In August 2025, BLACKPINK became the first K-pop girl group to headline Wembley Stadium in London, a venue with a capacity of approximately 90,000. According to widely reported coverage from international entertainment outlets, that moment, alone, told you something. The group was not in maintenance mode. They were not coasting on reputation. They were actively expanding. By the time Deadline's release window was announced, pre-orders had already reached nearly 1.9 million units during the reservation period, according to data shared by YG Entertainment. To frame that number, before a single physical copy had shipped, before any fan had held the album in their hands, BLACKPINK had already pre-sold more copies of Deadline than most K-pop releases would ever sell in their entire commercial lifespan. The stage was set. The fandom was mobilized. The momentum had been building for years. BL3, the record-breaking event. February 27, 2026. 2 p.m. Korea Standard Time. Deadline drops. The 5-track mini-album, described by the group's agency as a body of work that encapsulates both the individual musical capabilities of the 4 members and their combined synergy, went live simultaneously across physical retail and digital platforms globally, and within minutes, the tracking charts began to move. By the end of that 24-hour window, the confirmed figure was 1,461,785 copies sold on Hanteo Chart, the highest first-day sales total ever recorded by a K-pop girl group. According to data confirmed by YG Entertainment and reported by KED Global and South Korean entertainment news outlets, this figure surpassed the previous record, held by aespa's My World at 1,372,929 copies, by nearly 90,000 units. It also eclipsed BLACKPINK's own personal best from Born Pink's first-day performance of approximately 1 million copies by nearly 500,000 units. Pause there. In a single day, not a promotional week, not a chart cycle, not a streaming accumulation, 1.5 million people around the world purchased a physical copy of this album. That number came from multiple continents, multiple languages, and multiple demographics, organized through both organic fandom enthusiasm and the kind of coordinated buying infrastructure that Blink communities had spent years building. The first-day result also set a second historic marker. Deadline made BLACKPINK the first girl group in Hanteo Chart history to exceed 1 million first-day sales with 2 separate releases, Born Pink having previously cleared that barrier in 2022. No other girl group had done it once with a Korean release. BLACKPINK had now done it twice. The weekend numbers, confirmed on March 6th by YG Entertainment and Hanteo, pushed the story further. Final first-week total: 1,774,577 copies. Approximately 230,000 more than Born Pink's first-week performance, and the highest first-week sales total ever posted by a K-pop girl group. According to Hanteo data cited by multiple outlets, Deadline also topped the chart's monthly albums ranking with 1,468,894 copies counted in just 2.5 days from release, meaning the album outpaced the entire previous monthly record before the week was even finished. Globally, the album debuted atop the iTunes Top Albums chart in a confirmed 38 regions worldwide. In the United States, Deadline entered the Billboard 200 at number 8, making it BLACKPINK's third top 10 album on America's flagship chart. The lead single, Go, notably the first-ever song all 4 BLACKPINK members had co-written together, debuted at number 63 on the Billboard Hot 100, bringing BLACKPINK's total Hot 100 chart appearances to 11. According to chart data reported by Outlook India and other outlets, that is the highest number of Hot 100 appearances for any K-pop female act in the chart's history. Go simultaneously topped YouTube's worldwide trending chart upon release and set the record for the most viewed video in a 24-hour window during its release period. By the morning after the Korean release, the music video had already registered over 40 million views on the platform, according to data cited by Korean entertainment news outlets. In the United Kingdom, BLACKPINK's combined chart history reached a new milestone as well. With Deadline's entry, the group's tally stands at 12 entries on the UK Singles Chart and 4 on the UK Albums Chart, the most for any K-pop girl group across both categories. The album was subsequently certified million by the Korea Music Content Association, KMCA, for domestic certified sales of 1 million copies. Taken together, these numbers represent something that goes beyond commercial success metrics. They represent a coordinated, global cultural event, the kind that the music industry marks in its record books and does not easily forget. 4. Why this matters beyond K-pop. Here is where the story stops being about chart data and starts being about something considerably larger. The Western music industry has had a complicated relationship with K-pop's commercial achievements. For years, there was a tendency to acknowledge the numbers while implicitly categorizing them differently. To treat K-pop's physical sales figures as a product of a unique and somewhat unusual fan culture, rather than as evidence of genuine global commercial power. The argument, often unstated but frequently implied, was that K-pop sales mechanics made its numbers less directly comparable to mainstream Western commercial metrics. Deadline's figures make that argument increasingly difficult to maintain. Consider the broader context in which these sales occurred. The global K-pop physical album market, according to projections cited by the Korea Herald from the Korea Pop Music Industry Association, had been contracting steadily since its 2023 peak, declining from approximately 115 million total album units in 2023 to roughly 86 million by 2025. The overall tide was going out. Against that backdrop, BLACKPINK's ability to move 1.7 million copies in a single week is not just impressive. It is a data point that runs directly counter to the broader trend, evidence that the right act, with the right fandom infrastructure, at the right cultural moment, can still drive physical music sales at a scale that demands serious attention from anyone in the global music business. The coverage from major international media reflected this shift in perception. Rolling Stone characterized the album as a return to peak form for the group. Billboard centered its coverage on the commercial velocity of both the album and its lead single. The tone of engagement from mainstream Western music press, which has historically treated K-pop as a trend worthy of curiosity, rather than an industry force worthy of analysis, had shifted. Deadline was being discussed not as a K-pop story, but as a music industry story. That is a meaningful distinction. There is also a geographic argument buried in the sales data. BLACKPINK's numbers do not come from one territory. The pre-order figures, the first-day tallies, and the global iTunes chart distribution across 38 countries collectively suggest that Blinks, as a fandom, are genuinely distributed across regions in a way that few Western acts' fan bases are. South Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, North America, the United Kingdom, continental Europe, all registering simultaneously, all contributing to a number that crossed 1.4 million on day one. That geographic breadth is the thing the music industry is really watching. K-pop has spent roughly 15 years building the infrastructure for genuinely international fandom. Streaming coordination tools, fan club networks, organized, bulk buying systems, multilingual fan media. And BLACKPINK has arguably benefited from that infrastructure more successfully than any girl group before them. Deadline sales figures are the most concentrated evidence yet that this infrastructure is mature, global, and capable of producing numbers that cannot be dismissed as regional anomalies. 5. Fan reaction and cultural impact. You cannot tell the story of what Deadline achieved without telling the story of the people who made it happen. BLACKPINK's fanbase, the Blinks, is one of the most studied communities in the modern music industry, not just for its size, but for its organizational sophistication. In the years between Born Pink and Deadline, while the group was largely quiet as a unit, Blinks were not. Fan accounts across platforms maintained active engagement, coordinating periodic streaming campaigns to keep catalog tracks charting, organizing fundraising and charity projects in the group's name, and running multilingual fan media operations that kept the group's profile visible in regions where traditional promotional infrastructure doesn't reach. The communication channels, the coordination tools, the protocols for organized buying and streaming, none of that disappeared during the hiatus. If anything, those years gave the Blink community time to refine what it had built. By the time Deadline's campaign began in earnest, the infrastructure was not being assembled from scratch. It was being activated. The nearly 1.9 million pre-orders that accumulated before release day were a direct product of that activation. Fan networks across South Korea, Japan, the United States, the United Kingdom, and multiple Southeast Asian countries organized coordinated pre-order drives, sharing purchasing links, tracking regional chart positions in real time, and identifying gaps where additional purchasing could lift specific regional chart rankings. The whole operation ran, for the most part, entirely outside of official YG promotional channels, fan-led, fan-funded, and fan-executed. On the day of release, streaming parties were running across time zones. Fan communities in Europe had parties timed to the 2 p.m. KST release, which is 7 a.m. in London and 8 a.m. in Paris and Berlin, to ensure Go accumulated maximum streaming numbers during its critical first hours. In North America, the same communities had coordinated playlist ads and algorithmic activity to maximize recommendation signal during prime listening hours. These were not improvisational reactions. They were planned campaigns, running to schedules that had been drafted weeks in advance. Go carried particular emotional resonance within the Blink community for reasons beyond its commercial performance. The track holds a specific distinction. It is the first song all 4 members of BLACKPINK have ever co-written together. In the context of a group that had just spent several years in solo mode, each member developing independent creative identities, that collaborative songwriting credit landed as a statement, a deliberate one. Fans read it not merely as a creative detail, but as a declaration about where the group stood, how unified it was, and what this comeback meant to the 4 of them. That context made the commercial response feel, to many Blinks, like more than a chart victory. When the first day numbers arrived, and they were not just good but historic, when it became clear that they had cleared the previous record by nearly 90,000 units in a single day, the reaction from the community was emotionally raw in a way that observers of fan culture noted was unusual, even by K-pop standards. The feeling, widely expressed across fan forums and social media in the hours after the Hanteo confirmation, was described by many participants as relief as much as celebration. The uncertainty of the hiatus years, the wait for the contracts to be confirmed, the months of tour dates and pre-orders before the album was actually in hand, all of it resolved in a number on a chart. And the number was more than enough. In South Korea, the broader cultural reception mirrored the international fan response. BLACKPINK's commercial achievements have long carried meaning in South Korea that extends beyond the music industry. Their global reach is understood, domestically, as an expression of South Korean cultural soft power on the world stage. The deadline records were covered widely by Korean mainstream media, not just entertainment outlets, and framed as a national cultural landmark as much as a chart story. That framing, K-pop's success as cultural diplomacy, has been a consistent thread in how South Korea receives BLACKPINK's biggest moments, and Deadline was no exception. Section 6. What comes next? The record is set. The question the music industry is now quietly asking is, how long does it stand? The honest answer is that BLACKPINK's Deadline benchmark, 1,461,785 first-day sales, 1,774,577 first week, is going to be difficult to break in the near term. The specific combination of factors that produce those numbers is not easily replicated. A group with nearly a decade of brand equity, a multi-year hiatus that concentrated fandom demand to an unusual degree, a fan base that had spent years building and refining its purchasing and streaming infrastructure, a world tour running through major global markets in the months before release, maintaining visibility and emotional investment simultaneously. None of that means the record is permanent. K-pop does not work that way. Fourth and fifth generation acts, groups that are still in the early and middle phases of building their international fandoms, will continue to grow. aespa, whose record BLACKPINK surpassed in February, has demonstrated extraordinary commercial velocity and has a global profile that is still expanding. Other acts with large and highly organized fandoms are positioned to challenge the current ceiling as their commercial moments arrive. The industry's benchmark for first-day and first-week performance has been revised upward repeatedly over the past decade, and there is no reason to expect that cycle to stop. There is also the question of BLACKPINK's own future in this context. Deadline is a 5-track mini-album, their third extended play, not a full studio album. The group has not announced a full-length follow-up release at the time this video is being produced, but the commercial response to Deadline, by any measure, signals that appetite for a major BLACKPINK studio album is at a historically high level. Industry observers, according to widely reported commentary from Korean entertainment media, believe the group is positioned for continued full group activity, though individual scheduling and solo commitments will remain a factor. The Deadline World Tour, which ran 33 stadium shows across Asia, North America, and Europe through January 2026, with all shows selling out, reportedly drew estimated attendance of approximately 1.63 million people and generated estimated revenue that fan-compiled data suggests may approach the territory of their own Born Pink tour record, though official final figures had not been confirmed at the time of writing. If those estimates prove accurate, it would mean BLACKPINK has now headlined the 2 highest-grossing concert tours in K-pop history, both of them their own. What the global music industry is watching most carefully, beyond the specific BLACKPINK numbers, is what Deadline says about the health and trajectory of K-pop's physical sales model. The broader market has been contracting. Total volume is down from its peak. And yet here is a single release from a single group moving 1.77 million physical copies in a week. That is not a sign of a market in decline. It is a sign of a market that is, perhaps, concentrating, where the biggest acts with the deepest fandom infrastructure are capable of generating numbers that were unimaginable just a few years ago, even as mid-tier releases see softer performance. That concentration dynamic has implications for how labels, distributors, and streaming platforms think about K-pop going forward. It changes conversations about international licensing. It changes how tour promoters think about venue sizes. It changes how Western media covers the genre. And it changes the baseline against which every future K-pop girl group milestone will be measured. The record that BLACKPINK set in the final days of February 2026 is not just a number in a chart database. It is a new standard, a line drawn by 4 women who debuted nearly a decade ago in a genre the Western world had barely noticed at the time, and who have, through a combination of talent, fandom, timing, and extraordinary commercial reach, built something that nobody in the music industry can afford to look past any longer. The story of Deadline is a record broken. It is also, almost certainly, a preview of what comes next, both for BLACKPINK and for the genre they have done more than almost anyone to put on the global map. That is the story. Now here is the question we want you to answer in the comments below. You have heard everything. The debut in 2016, the global explosion of Kill This Love, the chart domination of the album, the tour records of Born Pink, the Wembley moment, and now Deadline. So tell us, which era of BLACKPINK do you think was the most impactful? Not just commercially, but culturally. Where do you think BLACKPINK mattered the most? Was it the debut years, when they arrived as something the world didn't know it was waiting for? Was it the Kill This Love era and the Coachella headline that made the Western mainstream take notice? Was it Born Pink and the tour that rewrote the economics of K-pop live music? Or is it right now, with Deadline, with Wembley, with first-week numbers no one had ever posted, that you think BLACKPINK is at the peak of their significance? Drop your era in the comments. The discussion is always alive on this channel, and we read everything. And if you are new here and you want to go deeper on how K-pop is reshaping the global music industry, not just the fan culture, but the economics, the touring business, the label strategies, and the cultural diplomacy, subscribe. Because the next video we are producing dives into the full financial anatomy of the Born Pink World Tour, how BLACKPINK built the most profitable touring operation in K-pop history, what it cost, how it was structured, and what it changed for every K-pop act that came after them. That video is coming. You will not want to miss it.